Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar about MOSAiC research data publishing, organized by PANGAEA. My name is Dana Ransby, and I'm PANGAEA's data editor at Alfred Wegener Institute in Bremerhaven, Germany, since about 2 years. And I took over the responsibilities of data management for MOSAiC project in PANGAEA. So get know me as a contact person when it comes to data publication with us. Although I'm sure that over the time you will certainly also get in touch with other colleagues of mine. The content of this webinar today is as follows. So I will start with answering the question, why do I have to publish my data, MOSAiC data at all? So this will be handled in context of the MOSAiC data policy, FAIR principles, and good scientific practice. And we'll move on to what is data publication at all. So today I would like to really talk about data publications, not paper publications. Although paper publications in scientific journals also comes into play when it comes to timing of your data publications in data repositories. So this is interconnected, and I would like to speak about this for a little bit. Then I would like to introduce you to the data repositories that are available for the MOSAiC project, for MOSAiC project data publishing. And because I come from PANGAEA, I will devote the rest of the talk to data publication processes in PANGAEA more in detail. I would like to ask you one more time if you can switch off the microphones. I can hear the noises, but thank you. So this is a picture or scheme of the observation to analysis, O2A. So data management in MOSAiC project is a part of the O2A concept of Alfred Wegener Institute, which have been developed over the recent years. And MOSAiC project is a large user case in which many new features are continuously being developed. For example, for the first time, a great number of external participants need to be granted access to O2A infrastructure. So this is also very new for us. And lots of data workflows needs adjustments. And this is, of course, on one hand, difficult, but it's also an opportunity for O2A to further develop. And in this respect, we are happy to have you on board, and we would like to hear your feedback to the individual components of the O2A workflow and its documentation. So this is how we can really improve and how to make this service better for MOSAiC consortium. Now I switched to a little bit different view that you might be more familiar with. This is kind of view that my colleague Antonia Immerts chose during her data flow workshops in the previous times. So in here, the data pathway starts with a sensor, some kind of device placed on polar stand or on the ice. And an important building block of the metadata registry system is sensor, where ideally you share your metadata already before the expedition. And further, documentation of the sensor actions are done in the DShip action log. So here, the device actions and deployments with label, time, and geographical coordinates are recorded. So when this action recording is done, the raw data have been moved semi-automatically through the this procedure and end up the data storage. So in case of MOSAiC, the data storage is referred to as MCS, MOSAiC central storage, and that contains areas of raw data, which are called platforms, and also space for process data called workspace. So, and I'll skip these two parts, data monitoring and data analysis, because it's for today's talk is not that relevant. But as MCS is not a permanent storage, and at the end of the expedition, the raw data from platforms will be archived in PANGAEA or other repositories, as well as primary data. So, and primary data will have to be published by the PIs and authors in PANGAEA and other repositories. So this last part of the data flow will be the focus of my talk today. So we will be really concentrating on this last part of the data workflow. Now move on to the part where we need to answer what is or isn't data publication at all, in the sense that we are talking about it today. Why should I publish MOSAiC data at all, and when to publish the data? So this will probably look familiar to you, a simplified workflow of data through the scientific work and cooperation by researchers, data analysis, and paper writing. So this is something that takes time after the expedition. And at some point, you arrive to a paper draft. In case of MOSAiC project, this then goes, the draft goes to the project board, where potential authorship issues are resolved, and it's checked if the paper contains proper project attribution and data citations. And after that, the paper can be submitted to a journal, goes through peer review, which again, as you know, takes time. After that, hopefully it's accepted, maybe with revisions, and published with a DOI. So you're probably familiar with DOI, Digital Object Identifier. It's a persistent identifier used for identify objects uniquely. It's used for published papers, as well for data sets in data repositories. So in MOSAiC, we put lots of focus on the publication of data. So all data used in papers should be published before, ideally, and referred to in your papers. So what does publish mean at all? So fair data principles for data publications is a concept that you probably heard or are familiar with. It's become a standard that many institutions and also funding agencies aim for. And it's also the goal of the MOSAiC project and features in the data policy as well. I will be also talking about metadata. So I just explain what I mean by that. Metadata is basically data that describes data. It can what is the data? Typically, this means parameter and unit. Who's the author? Who is PI? Or it can also refer to other article, to scientific papers, or to institutions. Where? So basically, geolocation, latitude, longitude. It can have another dimension. Maybe water depth, snow depth, or altitude when it comes to atmospheric measurements. When? Yeah, this would be date and time stamp, or when it comes to geosamples, maybe age. And how? This is how the data were acquired, what were the methods, what was the processing. And so it's not only data that makes the data fair, it's actually also and mainly metadata. That's the what makes data interoperable and reusable. So with this in mind, it's important to stress that what is and what isn't fair data publishing. So you have the MCS available, MOSAiC Central Storage, and we have to keep in mind that MCS is not a long-term storage, and putting data on MCS is not a data publication, because MCS is not an archive. It's been a working database, and it's meant to be that. So for you, the members of the MOSAiC consortium, these data are findable and they're accessible. That's fine, but this might not be on long term. They are not very well equipped at this stage with metadata. Therefore, I'd say they're not very interoperable and reusable. One standard way of publishing data related to scientific papers is using the possibility to submit a supplement to a published paper, journal publishers. So such data, they are findable, definitely, at least in context of the published paper. But their accessibility is probably not ideal for several reasons. For example, the data format might allow this. Maybe this is often a PDF file with tables attached in it, and this is really not accessible and definitely not interoperable and reusable, because again, the metadata link is missing. And accessibility also might be compromised because when the research paper isn't open access, then the supplement isn't either. So for that, certified data repositories can guarantee a long-term accessibility and also findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. And that's why we recommend using services of data repositories for this. So, and when it comes to USB sticks or hard drives, we don't speak about public data at all, but also statements in a paper, something like data used for this manuscript were uploaded to PANGAEA and will be available soon, or even will be uploaded to PANGAEA. So this is not published data, really. So on the other hand, what is published data? What defines it? It's a fully, so published data is a data set or data collection equipped with a complete set of metadata. So it's fully citable by having a title, authors, abstract, and a persistent identifier. And it can have a link to a published scientific publication. And the data sets are citable just as normal journals. So in the reference list with authors, year, and a title. And then comes the repository name and digital object identifier. So the reference is pretty much the same as with scientific papers. So let's get back to this data flow I was talking about, including the recent developments in open data and fair data principles. It's this improved workflow should be a little bit adjusted, and that's what we aim also for in MOSAiC data management. And in this, data publication should actually precede any paper publication. So here we ask researchers to submit data as early as possible, even before the paper draft is finished. And then we need a little bit time, typically several weeks, to prepare the data for publication in repository and make these data citable. So they can still be data protected, but they already have a citation. With that in hand, you can already include the data reference to a paper draft, and then it goes the usual way to project board and peer review. And this is actually the correct way. We recommend to interconnect data publications with paper publications. Like this, the peer reviewers of your paper will also have access to the underlying data, and then they can fully evaluate the conclusions of the study. So it's also preferred. The cross-referencing is clear, but I also want to stress at this point that data publication doesn't have to be necessarily connected to a paper publication. Data can be published also as standalone publication, and the individual data set or collections or data products can be described by specialized data papers and published, for example, ESSD, system science system data or scientific data, specialized journals. So this presented workflow requires an extra planning step for the PIs and authors. It's perhaps more difficult, more let's say more organization needed, but you also have benefits from that by increased visibility. It's been researched and proven that journal papers that have published data receive more citations, so it increases the visibility of the publications. Yeah, with more citations, the credibility is increased, so you get more credits also for the not only for the data, not only for the paper, but also for the data from funding agencies and from your host institute. And also, it's improves the exchange with other researchers and improves the accessibility for them and for yourself to these data. You don't have to answer emails. Oh, can you please send me the files you used for this paper? You can just point to the data publication, and you can assure that this is the last version that you used for your paper. Also for yourself, for your organization, this is really beneficial. So the data set authors and paper authors can, but don't have to be the same. So by publishing data sets, you have the possibility to acknowledge the contributions of other people that contributed to the data generations, but didn't contribute to the interpretations or manuscript writing. Maybe other colleagues, scientists, technicians, or students who might not otherwise get a place as authors or co-authors, but maybe just in acknowledgements. And generally, the authors of data sets are those who contributed to collection and processing of data. But here, you can follow generally rules of good scientific practice. As drafted, for example, by DFG, by guidelines for safeguarding good scientific practice in Germany. So yeah, I will have a look at the results of our poll regarding the MOSAiC data policy now. So you have indicated that most of you, actually 43, 55 participants already signed the MOSAiC data policy. So this is really great. I hope that you all also read it very carefully. And we have 2 people who plan to sign it still, and 1 person who didn't sign and don't plan to sign it. I guess I'll go just very quickly through the next slides that are dealing with MOSAiC data policy, because I see that you probably are already quite familiar with it. So MOSAiC data policy basically regulates the data management, data access, data release, authorship, and acknowledgements of data in MOSAiC project. So please check the data policy, and everyone who works with the data from MOSAiC has to sign it. Now, when it comes to data provision, access, and sharing of MOSAiC data, so first of all, the data will end up at the MOSAiC central storage as a non-published data, but these are available for you in the consortium, and the data policy defines some releases deadlines for different types of data. But basically, by the beginning of 2020, all data, including laboratory sample analysis data, should be available for everyone from MOSAiC project on central data storage. Now, that means that you have these data at your hand. You can have a look at them. You can work with them and take them into account for your research. But it's very important that always the data provider and data PI must be informed and offers co-authorship. And when you are using these data for publication, I think that is really clear and doesn't need to be stressed very much. But whenever you want to use data from MCS, you need to first find PI and contact and ask for cooperation. The important thing from today's data publication point of view is the date 1st of January 2023, and this is when all MOSAiC data should be publicly available. Ideally, that means they should be published with data repositories. So this is something that one needs to keep in mind, and it's actually will be surprisingly soon when this happens. The MOSAiC data policy also regulates the acknowledgements. So MOSAiC data needs to be acknowledged or referenced in publications and other scientific publications. How to do that? So the MOSAiC project needs to be referred by its full name: MOSAiC Drifting Observatory for the Study of Arctic Climate, MOSAiC. And important is MOSAiC 2019-2020. This is how the data coming from this project can be findable, discoverable. And further on, the project ID must be also given together with the data and with the papers. So this for Polar Sand Expedition PS122, which is MOSAiC, is this label RV underscore PS122_00. It's grant number. And if you were funded from additional sources, this of course is also recommended to specify these awards and grant numbers. So for MOSAiC, I can say that if we receive when we receive submission related to MOSAiC project, this acknowledgements will happen more or less automatically. You just have to check if we did everything correctly, but we will also keep an eye on this in PANGAEA. Right, with this takes me to the part where we talk about where to publish MOSAiC data, which repositories are available for publishing MOSAiC data. So in this table, you can see PANGAEA in the first place, because PANGAEA is the MOSAiC, the primary MOSAiC repository for primary and raw data. And we also have other reliable repositories that are certified and approved by the project boards, who have an agreement with the project board. And we know that these also guarantee fair data principles. And please switch off your microphones. Huh? So we have some participants with microphones on. I'm not quite sure how to switch everyone off at once. Okay, seems like it's quiet again. So typically scientists that received funding from national institutes in the US or Great Britain, they they are asked to submit the data with the national repositories. So these are Arctic Data Center, ARM, BODC, and other data centers in the UK, where scientists funded by NERC need to submit their data. So this is all right. In case that you somehow need to publish your data in other repositories that are not listed here, it means that there's probably no agreement with these repositories as yet. And please get in touch with us or with Project Board to be more precise. And this will definitely get an agreement or talk about the approval of additional data repositories. Now getting to PANGAEA and have a look at the poll results related to the question, have you used PANGAEA? So this is more diverse. Most people, 21 of 55, did not yet. So you will be users with us, hopefully. 15 yes for data publication. 6 yes for data exploration or reuse. And some of you, 5 of 55 even for both. So thank you for the answers. So I will definitely now concentrate a little bit on introduction PANGAEA and also describe more in detail how we're going to work in data publication for MOSAiC project. So for those about half of you who have already worked with PANGAEA, I don't probably have to say very much in detail, but for the other ones, PANGAEA is an open access data repository for scientific and environmental data. We are co-hosted by 2 German institutes, Marum at the University of Bremen and Alfred Wegener Institute in Bremerhaven. So our data are typically archived in a relational database and equipped with georeferences in space and time. We publish our data with a full citation, including DOI. And our host institutes guarantee long-term accessibility of the archive data. And we also guarantee the fairness of data, findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability for machines and for humans. PANGAEA provides full dataset curation, which involves lots of human intervention. Our curators, including myself, we collect and curate the metadata, synchronize the data and metadata with the existing data sets in PANGAEA. So the submission of the data goes through ticket system, and the curators guide you through the publication system. And in the end, you will receive a link to proofs, and we need you to approve them before we release the data to the world. Because we ask you to publish the data very early, maybe before you have a chance to actually publish the interpretations in papers, it's possible you to ask us to put a moratorium on access. In that case, the data are password protected, but the metadata are already there and the dataset is fully citable. So this can be done until beginning of 2023. And on the other hand, we can also provide the authors of such password protected data sets with a special link that can be shared with maybe your colleagues, but most importantly for the reviewers of your papers, so that they can already work with the data that you published. So, and while the data sets are still in status in review, which can be the case if you're doing the data publishing and paper publishing at the same time in parallel, so the status of the data set can stay in review, and then you don't have to be too worried, because if anything changes in the data set during the peer review, you can still come back to us and maybe exchange the files, exchange the tables if necessary before the final publication happens. So now I'll guide you through several slides that show data sets on PANGAEA in PANGAEA's web interface. So this is an example of a raw data set, and the information of the splash page of the data sets contains following information. It has a citation in the header, a map with a location, and then other metadata that include, for example, here a reference to a cruise report related to that cruise, spatial and temporal coverage. This is typically calculated automatically from metadata or from the data table if that table contains georeferencing, latitude, longitude, and time coverage. Then information about event, so when and where the data was taken, with which devices, links to further metadata, to expedition, and so on. So the table, when we scroll down in the dataset on the web page, then we get a table that contains a list of files that were uploaded to PANGAEA server here, because it's a raw data. So here the data values are not in the table, but they're archived in as a link of as a list of links. And because the formats are, let's say, not standardized, the content must be described by the authors in a README file, or like in this example, in the form of a separate document. So this is a manual for raw data that was published separately. So, and this version, the raw data, then forwards to a new version of the dataset that contains data that have been calibrated, processed. And this is what the processed dataset can look like. So in this screenshot, I've selected this screenshot on purpose because here I can show you what it looks like when we're still working with the dataset, with authors and data repository. So this dataset is still in review in this time when I made the screenshot, and you can also see that the login is required. That means that the other users cannot see the data table like I showed you before, but everybody can already see on the PANGAEA website the metadata related to the paper. So important here is the parameters which are contained in this data set. So full name, short name, unit, and then each parameter can have a PI. Ideally, we also want to describe each parameter by simply by method, and each parameter can get some additional comment. So, and this individual data set is a part of a larger collection. So data sets that have been collected, that are published in a similar way. The table has a similar structure. They contain the same parameters. Conditions were, let's say, comparable, can be published as a kind of publication series. So this can be, for example, the same type of data measured in different locations or during different time periods. So these can be put together in a collection. This is what such a collection looks like for, in this case, for 23 distinct time periods or expedition legs in this data set. So additionally, this collection is related to a now published scientific paper. And it has also an abstract interesting or important thing is to this feature that you can copy the citation if you're not quite sure how to cite the data set. Can I please remind you to switch off the microphones? So you can copy the citation by a button here, or you can export it to different formats. So this is possible for all datasets that have been published already. Right, and for MOSAiC data, for MOSAiC project, we already have some data published in PANGAEA, about 15 datasets at the moment, and you can explore them with, when you type MOSAiC, you can select project MOSAiC, or you can type MOSAiC 2019-2020, and after these expressions, you'll find it. As for the other repositories, I can show you an example of atmospheric radiation measurement, ARM repository. So here the MOSAiC data are already published as well. They are available, or starting being published as well. They are available via the ARM data portal with a link here. There are 70 processed data streams from over 50 instruments available in their data discovery portal. Is a link again, and the ARM released a new data discovery portal, which provides an integrated view of data details. It contains metadata, data plots, citations, and contacts to researchers. ARM will also make their data streams available through the Data1 member node. And here is a link to PIs who contribute to the data. So whoever, if there's anyone for who it is relevant, you can use this link for submitting your data to ARM. And the last part, maybe the biggest part, I will go back to PANGAEA now, and I will explain to you more about data publication in PANGAEA, so for MOSAiC project. Right. So here it's me, or it's one of my colleagues, and so we are receiving the data from you researchers from MOSAiC project. Data arrived. Oh, thanks. This is a Word document containing an embedded photo you took of your screen with the spreadsheet open. Yeah, does your computer not support GNOME files? Maybe you need to update. So this made me really laugh when I saw this on XKCD. It was so much real world. But unfortunately, we are not ready for the GNOME files yet. And we ask you before you send us your data files for publishing in PANGAEA, you will need to prepare them for us. And here I would like to present you with some hints how to help you to prepare them and to make the upload process smoother for everyone. So at first, I would like to talk about the let's say most typical data type that arrived to PANGAEA, tabular data. So classical tables with parameters and values. I will show you examples of that in a moment, and I won't read through all this. This is really a lot of text, but I want to make this in this slide available for you for later to read through in detail, and this will also be part of the documentation later. So basically, this type of data might be submitted as a tab delimited text file or Excel format. The most important part I want to stress is that we would like, or we need you to provide an event for each observation, for each, let's say, line in your table. So event in our terminology is device operation ID in MOSAiC terminology, and I will come back to this after I'll go through several slides. But keep in mind that the event or device operation ID is very important, and also georeference, latitude, longitude, and also date and time is very important for each of the lines in the table. And I think that most of the data generated during MOSAiC will have such a georeference. And here's an example of what such a table might look like. So I said the event is important, but here in the first column of this table, there isn't an event. Well, the reason is because it only was one single event. This is an example of data of ice observation from academic Fedorov. And these have been taken during one event, which is basically a ship track. So we don't need this for every single line. This doesn't have to repeat. But important is date time in a standardized ISO format, then latitude and longitude in decimal format. And then we have a long list of parameters that have been, in this case, visually recorded from the shape by various scientists. And so these parameter names must appear in the header. So ideally, there should be full parameter names. But if for some reason this is not possible, make another table, please, with the same sequence of the parameters as are the short names in the header you used. And then in this other table, you can explain the short parameter name by the full parameter name. Always very important is the unit. So most of the units used in PANGAEA are SI units, and important thing is that we always look through these parameter names and we match them with the catalog of PANGAEA parameters, and maybe these will have then finally a slightly different name from the name you used, but this makes these datasets interoperable and comparable to other datasets published in PANGAEA. So each of the parameters can have an own PI. So if some of the parameters were measured by one person and others by other person, who should be contacted in case of questions, this is possible. For each parameter, we also need to or prefer to add a method, and it is possible to add a comment. So I'll just click at this link and show you what, hopefully you will see my browser window, what such a dataset looks like in PANGAEA. So this is actually this is actually the first tabular MOSAiC dataset published in PANGAEA open access already. So if you scroll down, you can see the values. Here are the parameters that I showed you before. And you can see that the project is MOSAiC. You click on this, you get more information, short label, and the funding number here as well. You can copy the citation of the dataset and reuse it on your publications. You also, I would like to stress the abstract for the dataset that describes the data, not any related paper. I'll go back to the slides and move on to different type of data. So while I mentioned that this is the most typical data set we publish in PANGAEA, that's what we specialize to. We also can publish non-tabular files, like binary files. These can be, for example, shape files, netcdf, images, or films. And these are archived as links to files. In this case, we would need you to prepare the submission in a slightly different way. Of course, we need the files. But again, for each of the files, we need an information about the event or device operation ID. We need the georeference, latitude, longitude, date and time, and ideally for each of the data, each of the files, the description, what's inside. If this is repetitive, this can also be described in one README file. So this is a kind of example of what such submission of a file list might look like. So definitely this is important in case the content needs to be described more in detail, like in this example. But we have for each of the files an event that this is related to. So latitude and longitude. And for example, I have invented this a little bit. So these are not real data, or the data set. I mean, the data are real, but I wanted to add here a column with steps to stress the fact that also the 3D dimension is important. If you do some measurements in water column, for example, the depth is also important if the file is somehow related to depth. Date and time, yeah, I mentioned. So, I mean, without this imaginary depth, I can show you what such file is then looks like in PANGAEA. So this also comes. This is one of the MOSAiC data sets that have recently been submitted to PANGAEA. This data set is still in review. It is related to a paper that is in review now, with a link to it already. We have here the information about the individual measurement events. So in this data set, it is an these are photos of taken from ROV, from ROV beast under the sea ice. And when I go down to the dataset table, you see it contains a list of these individual files with their description, date, event. We also have another possibility to deal with to present files that contains images, which is a nice showcase in this case. So we can create such a gallery of pictures. So we keep fingers crossed to the authors of this data set so that it's published soon. I'll go back to my slides. Sorry. So further preparation of your submission includes title and project and citations and abstracts. I will show you this with a little bit of graphics now. So here's a link to our submission form, data submission form in PANGAEA. And at the moment, you will get a form a little bit like this. This is just a screenshot. But first of all, you need to log in to PANGAEA. I have seen that one of you here present at least are not users of PANGAEA yet. So for submitting data, you will need to register yourself as users, and we recommend you to do it with your ORCID. You probably know as researchers, ORCID is an open researcher and contributor ID, and this identifies you uniquely, and like this, you can claim the ownership of this data set and get credit for it. But you are very lucky as participants of this webinar because you have the opportunity to see some mockups, screenshots of our new submission interface that will be coming soon, and I will lead you through this already because probably will in the future work with that one. So here the data set needs a title. Typically we ask you, or the title should contain what was measured, where, and when. Authors with contacts and institutions. You can add keywords, and abstract is very important. So abstract should be different from an abstract of your maybe prepared or submitted paper. It should be data specific and has to concentrate on what, where, when, how, and why was observed or measured or calculated. And in data sets, we need to avoid interpretation of the results. We really concentrate on describing the data itself without any judgment. So the interpretation is a matter of paper, but now here we publish only the data. Yeah, in the next step, we will confirm the license. You can choose a moratorium. Again, for MOSAiC, this can be up to 2023. In the project field, you will make our life easier if you select or if you type MOSAiC. You also have a space for leaving us more comments and add some additional words, which come from different funding sources. And finally, and most importantly, we need your files. So if these files are many, if there are more than 20 files, individual files, or if they are the attachments are greater than 100 megabytes in total, you can go back and send us a comment that you need an upload link, and we will send you an upload link where you can dump these data. Right, so this was the walk through our new submission system that is coming soon. And I promised you some minutes ago that I will concentrate a little bit on the event or device operation ID explanation. So you're probably very aware, at least those of you who already have been to Polarstern, that logging of scientific work during MOSAiC is done by dship log. And after the end of each leg, this dship log is exported and imported to PANGAEA in a slightly different form, but basically we are using the same labels. So the device operation ID in dship comprises of the campaign leg, so PS122/ and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for MOSAiC legs. The next comes the science activity. So these are typically weekly activities, unless they are continuous. And in the end, it's a number of device operations. So this is a continuous number from the beginning of the science activity. In the dship, additionally, each device operation is connected to potentially numerous actions. So like here we have information, profile start. It can be station start, station end, or deployment. And to this granularity, we are not able to take over in our PANGAEA events. So the difference between the device operation ID and log in dship and the event in PANGAEA is this granularity. So in PANGAEA, the device operation ID equals the event. So in a way, the events list in PANGAEA is a slightly simplified list in comparison to the dship list. So we do not subdivide the events into individual actions, which might be perceived as a disadvantage. But the good thing is that part of events in PANGAEA is a link to the sensor web. And the sensor web provides a whole lot of other metadata. There are these actions, but there are also lots of information about the sensor. So this is the link between sensor and PANGAEA goes through these events. Now I'll take you to a PANGAEA website, expedition website, on which we have a list of individual MOSAiC legs, the list. So here we start with MOSAiC leg 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we academic Fedorov leg here as a part of MOSAiC, of course. And we always prepare these event lists after the DShip list is closed. So we have now for 1, 2, I think 3 legs of Polarstern. And from here, from this list of legs, you can, for each leg, click on the events list. So this originally, as I explained, comes from the device, from the DShip, and doesn't contain the individual actions, but contains the sensor, AVI sensor link, which provides additional metadata. And this link will appear in datasets under event description, the metadata header. So these lists for each expedition can be viewed online, which might not be that helpful, maybe for an overview, but most of all, it can be downloaded. And this is the source where you can, for example, use, unless you have your own sources, for the event information that we need you to associate with the data submission. So, right, if you find a mistake in an event, which can happen, this cannot be corrected retrospectively in DShip log, but it can be corrected in PANGAEA in sensor, be done at once. And we have a link here to the instructions, how to do that. So this link will be available for you, and contact us via contact form using the correction sheet which is provided, and we make these changes directly in PANGAEA. I think that we're running a little bit out of time, and I suggest I skip the a little bit part about raw data publishing. Just give you some little overview. The raw data publishing will happen in MOSAiC project semi-automatically in the near future. We already have a couple of raw data sets archived in PANGAEA for those standard ones that we've been doing before. And for some, we need to still proceed with that. But the responsible PIs will be informed and ask for proofread or for agreement to finally publish it. And if you submit your data and the raw data that belongs to that, so if you submit your primary data and you need a link to the raw data that these primary data are based on, just contact us and we will take care of publishing these raw data in near future. Right, so this, I will show you the members of PANGAEA's data management team for MOSAiC. So that's myself, Anna Ransby. Sorry. You'll also have my colleagues Ariane, Steffi, and Amelie that will be in direct contact with you in data curation. You can contact me via this email, and generally PANGAEA here via info. And the information and slides from this webinar will be available at Space's website, which I'll make available to you. In MOSAiC data flow, you can not only rely on PANGAEA, but for issues not related to data publication, you can get support from my colleagues in the computing center. So please contact us in that case when it's not related to PANGAEA directly using the support at MOSAiC data address. And your request will be passed to responsible colleagues. And with this, I would like to close the presentation part and open it. So please feel free to ask questions, switch on your cameras, microphones. Let's debate for some minutes now. Thank you for the attention.